Hey y'all, this is Alisha Costanzo and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my March TBR wrap-up video. All the books I read in March. More than on my TBR, which is impressive. Okay, so let's do some stats real quick. I read 12 books in March, which is way more than I thought I would actually read. I don't know how that happened, but I know I read 3 books in 2 days because yay Megan March. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so of the 12 books that I read, 10 of them were adult. Weird. 2 of them were YA. Again, weird. 6 of them were audiobooks and 6 of them were ebooks, so I'm still at my half and half mark, which is fine. Interesting, but fine. I read 3 mystery thrillers, 5 romances, 2 historical fantasies, which weird. 1 sci-fi dystopia and 1 just straight fantasy. I read this month 3,105 pages. What? Yeah. And then I also read 54 hours, 32 minutes, and 50 seconds, which is 2 days, 6 hours, 32 minutes, and 50 seconds. So it's a lot for me. It's a lot for me. My writing suffered for it, I can say that much, but I don't know if anybody really cares about that. Okay, so let's talk about book number 1. This was City of Bones by Michael Connelly. This is book number 8 in the Bosch series. And my word for this is shark. I rated this, I think it was 4.5 stars, which is pretty typical for a Bosch book. I already knew what was going to happen through most of it because this was one of the major plot threads that was used in the first season of Bosch on TV, you know. But shark because the girl that is his love interest in this book, oh my gosh. She was a shark, or somebody who would play with sharks through a cage. Like, there's a picture of her feeding a shark through a cage in part of it, but it appeals to her personality because she is the kind who disobeys rules in the opposite way that Bosch does, in a way to try to promote herself and further herself because she thinks she's better than the rules, whereas Bosch knows he has to break the rules sometimes in order to fight against cops who are breaking the rules. It's the only way to beat them. But he tries to play within the lines as much as possible, which is, again, why I like him. Not my favorite of the books, but I am glad I'm through that. I'm glad that some of the things that happened in the TV show didn't happen in the book, or happened differently in the book, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but death. I like death sometimes in books like this. Anyways, that was book number 1. Book number 2. I'm going to do book number 2, 3, and 4 because they're a series, and it is Savage Prince, Iron Princess, and Rogue Royalty by Megan March, which is, I think, the Savage trilogy, and Kane Savage, which is an amazing name. I love that name. It's corny and awesome at the same time. And then Tempe. I don't remember what her last name is. I remember Tempe or Temperance because I watch Bones. And I gave all 3 of these 5s. It was super tense. The first one was really, really sexy. So the first word for this is hot. Totally hot. There's a sex club involved. Strangers meeting, having sex kind of thing. And I liked it. It was amazing. Book number 2 was the word, or phrase, I should say, for this was called it, because I totally called the ending of it. I don't usually call like the end of the series, but usually the first 2 cliffhangers, I'm like, alright, those are things that I know. 1, that she does really, really well, and 2, what they're usually going to be, because it's the obvious thing, which brings us to the like trickery thing at the end of book 3. So totally called it, what was going to need to happen. Still really sexy. Still a lot of fun, angst, and like connection between the 2 romance characters. Chemistry. They had chemistry through the whole thing. Totally worth the read. And the last one was Really? And that's because, again, of the end, I knew something of the sort was going to happen, and I had a feeling, because I knew that one of the characters had their own book series, that something was going to happen the way it did, but it wasn't exactly the way I thought it was going to be. There's that. There was one little twist within it that got me, and that made me prompt the really. So, by the way, Kane Savage is an assassin, and Temperance is the assistant at one of the other characters, the mob boss, this woman's whiskey business. They make whiskey, and she is a metal artist, and so it was just really interesting. And her brother is a smuggler, so I mean, she's used to breaking the law. She used to chop cars and stuff, and so there's a lot of really cool things going on in that whole section of her world. I liked it. Alright, so book number 5 is The Night Swim by Megan Golding, and this is one of my books for another video that I'm doing, so I'm not going to get too in depth with this, but essentially this was suggested by a lot of YouTubers and still is, and I can absolutely see why. I had a hard time getting into it, but once I was into it, like, I haven't stopped thinking about this book. I gave it 5 stars. My word for this is haunting, because it's been haunting me. And it, of course it's going to be. It's about this back and forth present day court case of a rape victim who is going through with charging a young man who is like a superstar swimmer of raping her, and all the stuff that goes along with the trial. And the main character is a podcaster, so she's actually podcasting through the trial, things that are going on, trying to see both sides of the case, which was very well done. And then it goes back to this past one, a murder that was ruled as an accident, and of the town whore, essentially, who was raped a lot by 3 dudes. Like, some of the things that I saw, they showed just enough for you to picture it yourself, which creates a more visceral reaction. That is like good writing, what good writing is supposed to do. You don't have to lay it all out for someone. You just show them enough details, concrete details, to string that emotion that you can finish what the hell was happening without actually having to see it. So I have a very vivid imagination, so that's why like things like this really, really get me, and why I like the sparseness and not needing everything said to me. The implication, I'm just haunting. Although I did call the ending. It was set up for that, and I wasn't surprised at all by it. Although it still really angers me that that's what it was, because it was the choice that was going to create the best plot. So, like, I get it. I'm just... The book haunted me, dude. It's still haunting me. Although somehow it's like number 2 on my list for the month. I do have something else in my number 1 spot, which is very surprising. But I thought it was going to be this book almost all month. To my last 2 books. Alright, so number 6 is The Mistletoe Murders by P.D. James, and this is the collection that I rolled. I gave this a 3, and my word for this is half, and that's because there's 4 stories in this. The first 2, Mistletoe Murders being one of them, and the second one, which I don't remember the name of it, but had a guy watching a couple out the window and witnessing something terrible, and the whole time it's like, oh, I'll tell them when this happens, oh, I'll tell them when I saw when this happened, oh, I'll tell them when I saw when this happened, and then the guy is like hanged or prosecuted as guilty, and you're supposed to stand up and save this innocent dude, and then we come to find out that he's the one that actually killed her. So, sorry to ruin that for you, but it's not something I would highly suggest. But The Mistletoe Murders was the first one it was named after. It was also a really, really good story about one of those kind of locked room murders. So that was pretty cool. Sorry, my memory was full, but it was a cute little locked room read. So I enjoyed that one quite a bit. What number am I on? Book number 7 is Torrent by Gemma James. This was one of my 21 before 2021s, and I gave this a 2.5. My word for this is unbelievable, because if you watched my Instagram challenge, reading challenge, which I will link above and down below, it was unbelievable, and the writing was bad. None of the characters or the situation, like, there was so much potential with this idea, and it was just not good. I mean, I even skimmed some of the sex stuff. It was just not good. So, yeah, I'm not going to linger on it. Because my next one, number 8, is Trashy Conquest by Gemma James. And I also gave this a 2.5. My word for this was too easy. I loved the first in the series. There was so much tension of we want to be together, but we can't be together. So that slow burn. And then they had sex. And then even though everything else was happening, they didn't, restrict themselves at all. Barely. A second of restriction happened, and then they kept not getting caught. And the one time they did get caught, it was so late that I'm just like, does it matter anymore? It's by your brother, first of all, in his club. You found out that he was with your wife and all these other, it was all just too easy. Got his divorce way too easily. He got his company way too easily. She got the things that she, got rid of her ex way too easily. It was too easy. It was just too easy. So, yeah, there we are with that. Number 9 was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And I started this book off absolutely loving it. And then he went into that, mock battle after being remade from a red to a gold, and I had a hard time caring a lot of the time about their little silly war and the corruption and all that other stuff. I don't know. There were times where I was really mad, and then really, really excited and into it, and my word for this is fuck. And that's because, one, some of the violence that was in this was pretty gruesomely awesome. Two, was the way that ended just makes you, like, need to get into book 3 or book 2. And I don't know if I'm going to, because the first one frustrated me so much, but there's potential, so I'll probably eventually get to book 2. But I loved a lot of the connections to real life in this, and there's just so much to say fuck over. So, pretty good book. Another YouTube suggestion. I'm pretty glad I read this. I did give it a 4. Even when I put my cop pile through, it was a high 3. So I rounded up to a 4 because I just felt like the parts that I had issue with weren't really issues. I was just frustrated by what was happening, which meant it was good writing. And that I kept going up and down was good plotting. And so I had to be a little bit more lenient versus how I felt while reading it versus what was actually there. So here we go. Book number 10 is The Empress of Assault and Fortune, and this is again a YouTube suggestion. You see the theme that I'm working towards because I pulled that on my TBR challenge, and so I'm trying to get through that for real so I can get you guys a video about it. But this is by Nevo, I think is how you say it, and this is 1 to 5 star and to my favorite book of the month. It was really short, but it was just the length of it made it powerful. Like, because we didn't dawdle on things, the story was just told. And even though it was narrated and kind of omniscient, I loved it just the same. Like, I understood why it needed to be done that way for it to work, and it was brilliant. And my word for this is strong women, because that's what it centers around, is strong women. Consistently, constantly, through heartbreak, through torture, through all of these things, these women remained strong, and I loved the ending of it. I can't wait for the next one. Alright, book number 11 is Warrior Mage by Lindsay Buroker, and this was my second chance pull. I really, really loved the beginning of this. If you watched my 10 chapters of 10 books, so I read the first chapter of 10 books that I pulled from my freebie jar, and this is one of them, which is why it was in my second chance jar, because I didn't end up reading this one, but I wanted to. So the first chapter of this was awesome. The second chapter was still pretty good, and then it fell into this kind of meh space for me where I really, really had to struggle to read through it. And even then, skimming, I was just frustrated by the overly dramatic things that were going on that was trying to create tension, but it wasn't the kind of tension I wanted. It was kind of silly mess stuff they were lucky to get away with, and not the real kind of driven tension from the first chapter and the action from the first chapter. So I ended up DNFing this, although I can see why a lot of people would like this book. Like, I can. It just wasn't for me. And my word for this was slow, because it slowed way down after the initial impact, and I wish she could have cut a lot of the flashback repetitive stuff that happened that we could have gotten in a couple sentences instead of a couple pages. So there you go. It's a similar problem I have with Stephen King, who's widely popular, so, I mean, you can take my opinion with a grain of salt there. Alright, so my last book, number 12, was Bearing the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I was really hoping that this was going to be a 5-star. It was one of my 5-star predictions, which is why I landed on this, as well as the fact that as a YouTube suggestion, although it was supposed to be The Girl in the Tower, I realized that was book 2 instead of book 1. So I had to read book 1. I still kind of want to read book 2, kind of, sort of, maybe. I gave this a 3. I know it's very popular. My word for this is Frost. My main issue was that Frost was promised us in the first chapter, and we only got little glimpses of him until the very end of this 15-hour book. And I wanted more of him instead of all of this Christian bullshit that we had to deal with, and the trying to push the protagonist down. Like, I got it. After halfway through the book, I got that people wanted to destroy this girl and wanted to see her fall in line, and that wasn't going to happen. I didn't need example after example after example after example after example of it. I didn't need it. And I grew frustrated with it. In the last hour and a half of the book, I really enjoyed, because Frost was in it. And if he's more present in book 2, I think I'll be happy with book 2. But if he's not, I'm going to get really, really pissed off at book 2. Because he is the interesting character. They're both interesting, but her with him is more interesting than her with the priest and her crazy-ass stepmom and her ignoring her father and the poor little pagan creatures. So, yeah, I wanted more frost, essentially. Alright, so the last thing I need to tell you about is my punishment that I'm still waiting for from January. 6 weeks left. I have 6 weeks left. I might, depending on how fast the other people in front of me read it, get it this month. But it's likely that it's going to be next month. So I'm going to try to plan accordingly because it is a 24-hour long book. Deborah Hartness. Another series, or the first one, I found a little bit slow, and we could have cut like 100 pages out of. So I'm imagining this one's gonna feel the same about. We'll see. My husband liked it. A lot of my friends liked it. A lot of people like it. And I mean, I enjoyed the first book. I think I gave it a 3.5 or a 4. I just am gonna be frustrated, and I know I'm gonna be frustrated, and so I'll get through it though. We'll get through it though. Okay. I'm also doing really well on my TBR for April already. I've knocked out 2 books already, and it is the 5th. So you guys know I'm doing well because I don't want any more punishments. I don't want them. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about some books that I enjoyed and didn't enjoy. Let me know what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy in March from your reading. Tell me about the books in the comments below. Make some suggestions. Let me know if you'd like to see a certain kind of challenge video, because I'm thinking of some more challenges currently to put in my game to make it more interesting. Alright, anyways, thank you again for watching, guys. And, what kind of emoji should I have you put in the comments below?
3 hours later.
No, put a flower in the comments below, because spring is coming, and I'm glad for that. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye.